All right, moving on. Angry Seattle City Council members questioned yesterday why Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson still doesn't have an answer as to why it took 5 hours after the bite of Seattle shooting to have that initial press conference. Um, uh, 3 people were killed in that event, several others injured. We have a young man, a 15-year-old who's in custody, and a 19-year-old who he exchanged gunfire with, apparently gang related, who ended up losing his life in that exchange. Now, Wilson announced yesterday, Mayor Wilson did, that she's asked the city's Office of Inspector General to conduct a thorough review. And until then, she's not really providing a lot of answers that the media and members of the city council have been urging. Councilman Dan Strauss really pressed hard on Allison Holcomb in yesterday's public safety meeting. She is the executive operations manager for Mayor Katie Wilson in her Office of Public Safety. Didn't get a whole lot of clarity in this exchange, and you could sense the growing frustration from these council members.
It's just that you mentioned that this is a charged environment at the moment. Um, and this is, I'm going to talk now about the police chief being asked to resign because it was similar in the way that Don Lindell was asked, was fired, was asked to resign. But the difference between Don and asking the chief of police to resign is Don runs a utility. She makes sure that our lights are on and that our rates aren't going up too high. But that same set of experiences that I had with Don Lindell being let go from the city occurred with Chief Barnes last week. With the most information that I've been able to be provided is that the mayor has a different window into the operations of the police department than the council does. Yet I haven't been told what she sees through that window. Why this is charged is there's 3 people dead. Why this is charged is that Seattleites went to sleep that night thinking that there was somebody indiscriminately killing people at the Space Needle. This is charged because the mayor asked the police chief to resign with very little information. And so the best that I can do is surmise that because there was some communication difference or difficulty that the chief was asked to resign. That's why this is charged. And this all could be avoided if there was clear, transparent communication from the start. And just like, back to you, Chief, I cannot thank you enough for not taking your attention off of finding these murderers, because we should be spending all of the time that we've spent this morning just focused on that.
Now, my colleague Randy Diamond put up a thorough article detailing how this whole exchange went down yesterday. I encourage you to check out the Center Square Washington page for that article. All right, we're going to dive in. Recall charges have been filed against Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson, accusing her of failing the city on public safety issues. There was the bite of Seattle shooting, then the forced resignation of Police Chief Shawn Barnes in the midst of a homicide investigation. So now we have Seattle residents Melinda Jacobson and Dale Osterud who have filed this recall. And they assert really that she's not following the city of Seattle's charter mandate that requires her to enforce city laws and maintain peace. That's kind of the gist of the recall complaint. So Andrea Suarez of We Heart Seattle, the group that's been out there cleaning up the drug infested parks and streets for the last 5.5 years and trying to connect people with actual programs that will get them off the streets and into rehab. Um, she has been talking about criticisms of the lead program and their creator, Lisa Dugard, for quite some time. She's glad that this Washington Policy Center report came out this week, basically exposing what she's been seeing on the streets in real time, she says, for years. But initially, I asked her about the recall filing with this recall filed against the mayor. And here's what she had to say.
I'm not surprised. There's been a lot of rumors that this was going to happen. And with the gaffes and the lack of leadership and lack of transparency and a motivated couple, here we go.
Yeah, be interesting to see what happens with this, but I'm hearing a lot of actually even proper questions, if you will, a little bit of pressure from some members of the council, even that are on her team, but her on her side, I should say, but that are, like
Well, it
we
was
don't.
really telling. I had an opportunity to be on the seventh floor for one of the press conferences, and none of the council member were flanked behind her when she appointed sales. And that's a big deal. It was very obvious that they're sending a message that they're not supporting her decision to have asked Barnes to resign, I guess, is probably the crux of it all, and just lack of, leadership, timing, use of good judgment. I have my own personal speculations, but we'll see how this unfolds.
Now, additionally, the recall charges state that Wilson failed in her duty by turning off or removing those closed circuit cameras. We've spent a great deal of time talking about that in the Stadium District and Little Saigon following the World Cup. You may recall under pressure, she turned those on during World Cup, but as soon as it was over, she wanted those cameras off. And there was an ongoing national discussion about, whether these cameras should be on or off. A lot of folks on the conservative side, don't want Big Brother watching our every move. But at the same time, we know these cameras have helped law enforcement solve some really critical crimes. So it's an ongoing discussion about the cameras. But the recall, here's how it works with the recall. It will go to a technical review from the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. They will look at this and say, okay, is there any merit to a recall challenge at this point? And then they would, if they deem there is merit to this, they will write sort of a ballot synopsis. That then goes to King County Superior Court because it's Seattle. So it'll be going to King County Superior Court. And then a judge decides if, in fact, um, what the recall basis is amounts to malfeasance or misfeasance on the part of the mayor. And if, in fact, she violated her oath of office. And then at that point, if the judge decides it should move forward, the signature gathering process begins. And then proponents would have basically 6 months to gather 70,000 signatures from registered Seattle voters, which is equal to 25% of the total votes that were cast in the city's previous mayoral election. That's kind of the threshold for folks. And then, if in fact they get those signatures, that would then trigger a special recall election, which would have to take place 45 to 90 days after the petition is certified. So a lot has to happen. Again, the King County Prosecutor's Office has to decide if it should move forward. Then we've got the King County Superior Court deciding if it should move forward. Then you would get those, supporters for the recall having to gather all those signatures. Going to be some time before this moves forward. But I want to put this response up from the office of Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson that was sent to our state editor, Andrew Paxton, who put up the article initially yesterday after the recall was filed. And they said this: while it does not appear to have merit, our focus remains where it belongs, on making life safer and more affordable for the people of Seattle. Since taking office, we're delivering meaningful progress, expanding community crisis responder hours, launching universal school meals this September, banning rental junk fees, accelerating shelter expansion, expanding transit, investing in our libraries. Voters there just passed a new levy hike there, and taking on unfair pricing at grocery stores. That work continues. The courts will address any questions. We will address the needs of Seattle. So it sounds like at least the take from the mayor's office at this point is they don't expect the recall to end up moving forward, and they're going to press ahead with the work of the city. All right, now I want to switch to the fires in Spokane. It's been 12 days, it seems like, yeah, it's only August 13th, my computer says, but it was August the 1st when those fires ravaged Spokane. The latest total I've seen is, I think, 913 structures, mostly homes, that were lost to those three fires. And the most devastating of those fires is the one that we know was set by an arsonist. He was captured on video and he has confessed to not only setting that fire, but apparently while he's been in Spokane for the last few years, at least in the last year, he claims to have set as many as 24 other fires. We're working to find out if any of those ended up resulting in any actual property damage that he can be tied to. But one of the homes that was lost was the home of State Representative Jenny Graham. That's her district, the 6th district. She actually was painting in her den that Saturday afternoon as they were getting ready to put the house on the market because she's not running for reelection and moving to Florida. That's when the alarm call came in and said, "You have to evacuate now." And she told me in an interview today that they really had just minutes. She had her elderly mother. Her husband was out of town. She had her elderly mother. They had to just grab a few things and basically race to escape the flames, and they lost everything. Um, she got into office originally, I should remind you, because her sister was murdered by the Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway. And she's been a tireless advocate for victims, really, in the state of Washington, as many of our policies have kind of gone toward helping the defendant rather than the victim of crime. That's why she got into office, and 8 years later, she says she's leaving because she doesn't feel safe in the state of Washington anymore, and unfortunately, she didn't get out before her home was, destroyed. But at this point, she's not allowed to even contact members of the media, contact her constituents because of election rules in the state of Washington. I didn't realize that until I reached out to her. Mind you, she's right now, all she has is her personal phone. She lost her legislative issued phone, her legislative issued laptop, and everything else that she owns in the fire. She's now at an extended stay place so she can remain in the district to serve out the remainder of her term. But the fact that she can't contact constituents because of these election rules, she thinks those need to be changed. She's reached out to the governor's office, as I did today as well, to say, wait a minute, we're in a national emergency here. Shouldn't we be able to lift these rules to allow lawmakers to contact their constituents at a time of crisis?
I did have an experience at one of the briefings and press availability, the first one. I was there. The governor has to know. It's been on social media that our house burned to the ground and our entire neighborhood burned to the ground in the Old Trails Rifle Club Road fire. He literally walked by me, no acknowledgement whatsoever, no phone calls reaching out, how can I help? I'm so sorry, this has happened. I'm a sitting lawmaker. And this does make it hard for me to have any sort of confidence that my request to allow us to be able to communicate with our constituents who are in need, um, it doesn't give me a whole lot of confidence that they'll do the right thing and suspend that rule to allow us to be able to help our constituents. This truly is a time when, regardless of what your political party is, we should be able to come together. And I don't see that as coming together when the Republicans are not being allowed to speak. I will say that Congressman Baumgartner was able to speak, and that's great. But, this really should be applying to all of us in this situation. There shouldn't be a party attached to it. And unfortunately, that is exactly what's happened right now.
And lastly, there is the agreement with the accused arsonist, the man who says he set the most devastating of those three fires that destroyed most of the homes, he left Arizona and came to Spokane after he was released from prison. He served 10 years after he killed his father, was able to plead that down to a manslaughter charge and got out after serving 10 years. And then, with an arrangement here in the state of Washington, he was able to come here, even though he did not complete, and I've seen the court documents, and we've reported on this as well here at the Center Square, that he did not complete some of the parole requirements, like going to mental health counseling, having a review there, and completing domestic violence uh, classes. So he did not do that, but he was still allowed to come to Washington to live with his girlfriend and her family here in Spokane. Here's Representative Graham on that.
That he was convicted of murdering his father, trying to kill his mother, and shot himself. He was adjudicated. He was let out early. Um, there were supposed to be some requirements in place that he was not following. And regardless of him following through with the expectations, he was allowed to seek being placed in Washington state. And there are concerns right now with how Washington state handled this.
Right.
Did this guy go through an evaluation? Was that a requirement? It's my understanding that Washington state was supposed to be supervising this individual, and I'm not clear right now as to why either that was supposedly happening or it wasn't happening, and if not, why. Those are questions on behalf of my constituents, and all of the people that are connected to this deliberate, heinous crime.
Now, as I mentioned, Representative Graham is asking Governor Bob Ferguson to lift the election rules. It's not a law, it's just election rules that preclude lawmakers from contacting constituents during election time. And you can understand why those are in place. You don't want, lawmakers dialing up constituents and saying, "Don't forget, vote for me, and here's why my opponent is, not the one you should be voting for." I can understand why those are in place, but at a time of an emergency like this, and she's not running for reelection, so she wouldn't be contacting them in that capacity. It might make sense to lift some of those rules. So again, I did reach out to the governor's office at the time we're recording this podcast on this Thursday. I have not received any response from the governor's office. She's also called for a special session. Representative Graham is calling for a special session to kind of address some of the loose laws in Washington that allow somebody like the accused arsonist, the confessed arsonist, to come up here, even though he had violated parole requirements. Um, why did we make that deal and bring him here in the state of Washington? And now he's confessed to destroying so many people's lives. So those are some things that Representative Graham suggests need to be dealt with in short order. If I receive any response from the governor's office, I will include that in my article to be published today at the Center Square Washington page. So that's it for today's episode of Washington in Focus. A lot covered here today. And as always, I thank you for watching. I appreciate your comments and subscriptions to our show. It matters a lot to us.